My dear Lord, I am therefore not interested in either material opulences or liberation. I am most humbly praying at your lotus feet for you to please give me any sort of birth within this Vrindavan forest, so that I may be able to be favored by the dust of the feet of some of the devotees of Vrindavan. If I am if I am given the chance okay. If I am given the chance to grow as a humble blade of grass in this land, that would be a glorious birth for me. But if I am not so fortunate to take birth within the forest of Vrindavan, I beg to be allowed to take birth outside the immediate area of Vrindavan, so that when the devotees go out, they will walk over me. Even that would be a great fortune for me. I am just aspiring for a birth in which I will be smeared by the dust of the devotees' feet, because I can see that everyone here is simply full of Krishna consciousness. No one here knows anything but the lotus feet of Krishna or Mukunda, for which the Vedas themselves are searching. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find Krishna, and it is said in the Brahma Samhita that it is very difficult to find Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by systematic reading of the Vedic literature. But he is very easily available through the mercy of a pure devotee. The pure devotees of Vrindavan are fortunate because they can see Mukunda, Lord Krishna, all the time. This word Mukunda can be understood in two ways. Muk means liberation. Lord Krishna can give liberation and therefore transcendental bliss. The word also refers to his smiling face, which is just like the Kunda flower. Mukha means face. The Kunda flower is very beautiful and it appears to be smiling. Thus, the comparison is made. The difference between the pure devotees of Vrindavan and the devotees in other places is that the residents of Vrindavan have no other desire but to be associated with Krishna. Krishna, being very kind to his devotees, fulfills their desires because they always want Krishna's association. The Lord is always prepared to give it to them. The devotees of Vrindavan are also spontaneous lovers. They are not required to strictly follow regulative principles because they are already naturally developed in transcendental love for Krishna. Regulative principles are required for persons who are not achieved in such a position of spontaneous love. Rama is also a devotee of the Lord, but he is an ordinary devotee subject to following regulative principles. He prays to Krishna to give him the chance to take birth in Vrindavan so that he might be elevated to the platform of spontaneous love. Lord Brahma continued, My Lord, sometimes I am puzzled as to how your Lordship will be able to repay, in gratitude, the devotional service of the residents of Vrindavan. Although I know that you are the supreme source of all benedictions, I am puzzled to know how you will be able to repay all the service that you are receiving from these residents of Vrindavan. I think of how you are so kind, so magnanimous, that even Putana, who came to cheat you by dressing herself as a very affectionate mother, was awarded liberation and the actual post of a mother. And other demons belonging to the same family, such as Agasur and Bakasur, were also favored with liberation and achieved you. Under the circumstances, I am puzzled. These residents of Vrindavan have given you everything: their bodies, their minds, their love, their homes, their possessions. Everything is being utilized for your purpose. So, how will you be able to repay your debt to them? You have already given yourself to Putana. I surmise that you shall ever remain indebted to the residents of Vrindavan, being unable to repay their loving service. My Lord, I can understand that the super excellent quality of the service rendered by the residents of Vrindavan is due to their spontaneously engaging all natural instincts in your loving service. It is said that achievement for material objects and home is due to illusion, which makes a living entity conditioned in the material world. But this is only the case for persons who are not Krishna conscious. In the case of the residents of Vrindavan, such obstructions as attachment to hearth and home are non existent. Because their attachment has been directed unto you, and their homes have been converted into temples by your constant presence there, and because they have forgotten everything for your sake, there is no impediment. For a Krishna conscious person, there is no such thing as impediments due to attachment for hearth and home, nor is there illusion. I can also understand that your appearance as a small cowherd boy, a child of the cowherd men, is not at all a material activity. You are so much obliged by their affection that you are here to inspire them with more loving service by your transcendental presence. In Vrindavan, there is no distinction between material and spiritual because everything is dedicated to your loving service. My dear Lord, your Vrindavan pastimes are simply to inspire your devotees. If someone takes your Vrindavan pastimes to be material, he will be misled. My dear Lord Krishna, those who deride you, claiming that you have a material body like an ordinary man, are described in the Bhagavad Gita as demoniac and less intelligent. You are always transcendental. The non devotees are cheated because they consider you to be a material creation. Actually, you have assumed this body, which exactly resembles that of an ordinary cowherd boy, simply to increase the devotion and transcendental bliss of your devotees. My dear Lord, I have nothing to say about people who advertise that they have already realized God, or that by their realization they have themselves become God. But as far as I am concerned, I admit frankly that for me it is not possible to realize you by my by my body, mind, or speech. What can I say about you, or how can I realize you by my senses? I cannot even think of you perfectly with my mind, which is the master of the senses. Your qualities, your activities, and your body cannot be conceived by any person within this material world. Only by your mercy can one understand to some extent what you are. My dear Lord, you are the supreme Lord of all creation. Although I sometimes falsely think that I am the master of this universe, I may be the master of this universe, but there are innumerable universes, and there are also innumerable Brahmas who preside over these universes. But actually, you are the master of them all. As the supersoul in everyone's heart, you know everything. Please, therefore, accept me as your surrendered servant. I hope that you will excuse me for committing the great offense of disturbing you in your pastimes with your friends and calves. Now, if you will kindly allow me, I will immediately leave so you can enjoy your friends and calves without my presence. My dear Lord Krishna, your very name suggests that you are all attractive. The attraction of the sun and the moon are all due to you. By the attraction of the sun, you are beautifying the very existence of the Yadu dynasty. With the attraction of the moon, you are enhancing the potency of the land, the demigods, the brahmanas, the cows, and the oceans. Because of your supreme attraction, demons like Kamsa and others are annihilated. Therefore, it is my deliberate conclusion that you are the only worshipable deity within the creation. Accept my humble obeisances until the annihilation of this material world. As long as there is sunshine within this material world, kindly accept my humble obeisances. In this way, Brahma, the master of the universe, after offering humble and respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and circumambulating him 3 times, was ready to return to his abode, known as Brahmaloka. By his gesture, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him permission to return. As soon as Brahma left, Lord Sri Krishna immediately returned to the bank of the Yamuna and rejoined his calves and cowherd boyfriends, who were situated just as they had been on the very day that they had vanished. They had vanished. Krishna had left his friends on the bank of the Yamuna while they were engaged in lunch, and although he returned exactly 1 year later, the cowherd boys thought that he had returned within a second. That is the way Krishna's different energies act. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna himself is residing in everyone's heart, and he causes both remembrance and forgetfulness. All living entities are controlled by the supreme energy of the Lord, and sometimes they remember and sometimes they forget their constitutional position. His friends, being controlled in such a way, could not understand that for 1 whole year they were absent from the Yamuna's bank and were under the spell of Brahma's illusion. When Krishna appeared before the boys, they thought, Krishna has returned within a minute. They began to laugh, thinking that Krishna was not willing to leave their lunchtime company. They were very jubilant and invited him. Dear friend Krishna, you have come back so quickly. All right, we have not as yet begun our lunch, not even taken one morsel of food. So please come and join us and let us eat together. Krishna smiled and accepted their invitation, and he had begun to enjoy the lunchtime company of his friends. While eating, Krishna was thinking, these boys believe that I have come back within a second, but they do not know that for the last year I have been involved with the mystic activities of Lord Brahma. After finishing their lunch, Krishna and his friends and calves began to return to their Vrajabhumi homes. While passing, they enjoyed seeing the dead carcass of Aghasur in the shape of a gigantic serpent. When Krishna returned to Vrajabhumi, he was seen by all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. He was wearing a peacock feather in his helmet, which was also decorated with forest flowers. Krishna was also garlanded with flowers and painted with different colored minerals collected from the caves of Govardhan Hill. Govardhan Hill is always famous for supplying natural red oxides, and Krishna and his friends painted their bodies with them. Each of them had a bugle made of buffalo horn and a stick and a flute, and each called his respective calves by their particular names. The cowherd boys were so proud of Krishna's wonderful activities that, while entering the village, they all sang his glories. All the gopis in Vrindavan saw beautiful Krishna entering the village. The boys composed nice songs describing how they were saved from being swallowed by the great serpent and how the serpent was killed. Some described Krishna as the son of Yashoda and others as the son of Nanda Maharaj. He is so wonderful that he saved us from the clutches of the great serpent and killed him, they said. But little did they know that 1 year had passed since the killing of Aghasur. In this regard, Maharaj Parikshit asked Shukadev Goswami how the inhabitants of Vrindavan suddenly developed so much love for Krishna, although he was not a member of any of their families. Maharaj Parikshit inquired. During the absence of the original cowherd boys, when Krishna expanded himself, why is it that the boys' parents became more loving towards him than towards their own sons? Also, why did the cows become so loving toward the calves more than their own calves? Shukadev Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit that every living entity is actually most attached to his own self. Outward paraphernalia such as home, family, friends, country, society, wealth, opulence, and reputation are only secondary in pleasing the living entity. They please they please only because they bring pleasure to the self. For this reason, one is self-centered and attached to his body and self more than he is to relatives like wife, children, and friends. If there is some immediate danger to one's own person, he first of all takes care of himself, then others. That is natural. That means he loves his own self more than anything else. The next important object of affection after his own self is his material body. A person has no information who has no information of the spirit soul is very much attached to his material body. So much so that even in old age he wants to preserve the body in so many artificial ways, thinking that his old and broken body can be saved. Everyone is working hard day and night just to give pleasure to his own self under either the bodily or spiritual concept of life. We are attached to to material possessions because they give pleasure to the senses or to the body. The attachment of the body is there only because the I, the spirit soul, is within the body. Similarly, when one is further advanced, he knows that the spirit soul is pleasing because it is part and parcel of Krishna. Ultimately, it is Krishna who is pleasing and all attractive. He is the super soul of everything. And in order to give us this information, Krishna descends and tells us that the all attractive center is He Himself. Without being an expansion of Krishna, nothing can be attractive. Whatever is attractive within the cosmic manifestation is due to Krishna. Krishna is therefore the reservoir of all pleasure. The active principle of everything is Krishna, and highly elevated transcendentalists see everything in connection with him. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that a Mahabhagavat or highly advanced devotee sees Krishna as the active principle in all moving and non moving living entities. Therefore, he sees everything within this cosmic manifestation in relation to Krishna. For the fortunate person who has taken shelter of Krishna as everything, liberation is already there. He is no longer in the material world. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Whoever is engaged in the devotional service of Krishna is already on the Brahmabhuta or spiritual platform. The very name Krishna suggests piety and liberation. Anyone who takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna enters the boat for crossing over the ocean of nescience. For him, this vast expanse of the material manifestation becomes as insignificant as the water in a calf's hoofprint. Krishna is the shelter of all great souls, and he is also the shelter of the material worlds. For one who is on the platform of Krishna consciousness, Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world, is not far away. He does not live within the material world where there is danger at every step. In this way, Krishna consciousness was fully explained to Maharaj Parikshit by Shukadev Goswami as he recited to the king the statements and prayers of Lord Brahma. These descriptions of Lord Krishna's pastimes with his cowherd boys, his eating with them on the bank of the Yamuna, and Lord Brahma's prayers unto him, are all transcendental subject matters. Thus, anyone who hears, recites, or chants them surely gets all his spiritual desires fulfilled. Thus, Krishna's childhood pastimes, his sporting with Balaram and the cowherd boys in Vrindavan, were described. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport on the 14th chapter of Krishna, prayers offered by Lord Brahma to Lord Krishna.
Thank you. I have it on the phone. Thank you. So we've Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapada Kamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kapasantobhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The Brahma's continuing his prayers and appreciating the qualities of the devotees of Vrindavan, where they have no desire other than to be with Krishna. They don't have to follow any regulative principles because they're already situated in spontaneous love for Krishna. He prays that how will you reciprocate with these devotees? You've already given yourself to Putana in exchange for her approaching you like a mother. So what will you give to the Brajbasis? So I think you'll be eternally indebted to the residents of Vrindavan. Interestingly, for the Brajbasis, there's no impediment because of attachment to home life. For the materialists, attachment to home and family are huge impediments blocking spiritual progress. Therefore, hitratmapatam griyamandagupam banam kadoya dharima shreyeta. Prahlad Maharaj told Hiranyakashipu that for materialistic people like you, for who are absorbed in the soul-stopping activities of family life, it's better to leave home and go to the forest. But for the Brajbasis, or for anyone who's fully Krishna conscious, there's no impediment due to home or anything, because their attachment is directed to you, and their homes have been converted into temples by your constant presence there, and because they've forgotten everything for your sake, no impediments. In Vrindavan, there's no difference between material and spiritual because everything is dedicated to Krishna's service. And the pastimes in Vrindavan are simply to inspire the devotees. If someone thinks that the Vrindavan pastimes are material, that's his misfortune. He's misled. Anyone, what is that? Abhajananti mamuta manushim tanamashrita. Anyone who thinks that Krishna has gotten as a material body is, again, a fool. Krishna has appeared in this transcendental form just to increase the devotion and bliss of his devotees. And let other people advertise that they're already realized, God realized, or that they've realized that they themselves are God. But I admit that it's not possible for me to understand you by body, mind, or words. I can only understand you to some extent. So please forgive me for stealing your cows and calves, and please allow me to go back to my abode so that you can enjoy your friends and calves without me, without my presence. In other words, Brahma doesn't feel himself fit to stay in Vrindavan. He has to do his work elsewhere. Now, Vrindavan is reserved for these extraordinary devotees, the Brajbasis, who are on the level of spontaneous love for Krishna in a particular loving mood. So I've created so much trouble, now it's better that I go. So the Brahma circumambulated Krishna 3 times and was ready to go back to Brahmaloka. And meanwhile, Krishna goes back and joins his friends. And to them it seems that Krishna has been gone only a moment. They were under the mystic spell of Lord Brahma for 1 year. And for 1 year, Krishna was expanding himself as the cows and calves. But they didn't know that. And for them, it seemed that only a moment had passed. So now they welcomed Krishna back. Oh, you've come back so quickly. And they invited him to join in their activities of lunch. And they were jubilant and were uh, enjoying together. And Krishna was thinking, these boys don't know that for the past year I've been busy with Brahma's business. So then they finished their lunch and they headed back to Vrindavan, passing by the dead body of Aghasura along the way. And Krishna is beautifully described. He's wearing a peacock feather on his helmet. He's decorated with forest flowers, garlanded with flowers, painted with minerals, colored minerals collected from the caves of Govardhan. The friends all had buffalo horn bugles, a stick, a flute, and they called their calves by name. And they were so proud of Krishna's wonderful activities that as they entered the village, they were singing his glories. They'd composed nice songs about Krishna, and they were singing. And all the gopis saw beautiful Krishna entering the village. So Parikshit Maharaj inquires, how is it that the Brajbasis had so much love for Krishna? And Parikshit Maharaj responded that they were attached to Krishna because Krishna is the soul of the soul. We're all attached to the body because the soul is in it. Prabhupada gave the example that we're attracted to some movie star or something like that, her beautiful body and face. But her body's only attractive because the soul is there. When the soul leaves the body, no one wants to have anything to do with her. So the body is attractive because the soul is there, and the soul is attractive because Krishna is there. Krishna is the life of Jivanam Sarvabhutesha. The Bhagavad Gita is the life of all living entities. So the fools want to save their old and broken bodies. Everybody's busy for the body. But the body is pleasing because of the soul, and the soul because of Krishna. And whatever is attractive is due to Krishna. Then Prabhupada summarizes this verse. What is that? Mahatpadam punyayusho murari. Samashrita ye padapalabam plavam mahatpadam punyayusho murari. Pavam budir vatsa param padam padam. Padam padam yadvipadam. Want to hand me my book? I've handled this someplace. Let's see. Maybe it's here. Yeah. Samashritam ye pada. Krishna's feet, pada, are here compared to in beauty to flower buds and are said to be the shelter, padam, of Mahat, which can refer either to the entire cosmos or to the Mahatmas, the great souls, the Mahatattva or the Mahatmas. And for those who've completely taken shelter of the abode of the lotus feet of Krishna, Murari, the vast ocean of material existence becomes like the water in the small hoofprint of a calf, Vatsapadam. The place for such devoted souls is not the material world, where there are dangers, vipadam, at every step, padam padam. Rather, the place for them is the supreme abode, param padam, the eternal abode of Krishna. In this way, the Bhagavatam recommends that one not stay in the dangerous material world, but return to the spiritual world by hearing about Krishna and taking shelter of him. Samashritaye padapallava plavam mahatpadam punyesho murari pavam budir vatsapadam param padam 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 yadvipadam natesha. At the end, Shukadeva Goswami gives the blessing that these descriptions of Lord Krishna's pastimes with his cowherd friends, his eating with them on the bank of the Jamuna, and Lord Brahma's prayers to him are all transcendental subject matters. Anyone who hears, recites, or chants them surely gets all his spiritual desires fulfilled. Thus, Krishna's childhood pastimes, his sporting with Balaram and the cowherd boys in Vrindavan, were described. Any questions or comments? Krishna, Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So it seems like Agasura's body was lying there for a whole year without being dealt with or without deteriorating.
It dried up.
It dried up. Okay.
It dried up that much.
Interesting. I thought someone would notice.
Someone would.
I thought people would notice in that year that there's this dead body. And
there is this dead body out here.
It's a large
item. Somehow they didn't notice. It didn't go that way or whatever. Also, yes, they didn't notice somehow. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is about the apparent misjudgment of Brahma.
About the
apparent misjudgment of Brahma. If we go back to the 7th canto and we see the whole interaction with Hiranyakashipu, it made me wonder. Everybody knows that Hiranyakashipu is praying to become, to take Lord Brahma's position, and there's fire coming out of his head and heating everything up, and everybody goes to Brahma for help. And Brahma's solution to this is to grant all these boons that are going to help him achieve this. And it just doesn't make sense.
It's a conundrum. There's some obligation. Austerity is very powerful. By austerity, practically Hiranyakashipu obliged Brahma, you have to give me what I want, by austerity.
So there's no option of saying, no, I give you something else instead.
There may have been some option because Krishna criticized, Lord Nrsimha criticized Brahma for doing it. In the future, don't do these things. But it seems he was practically obliged. He becomes so powerful that flames were extending from his head and he's scorching the universe and everybody's in terror. So Brahma has to do something. All right. Sometimes in war or politics, there are decisions like that. One has to practically lose everything, or almost has to make huge concessions because otherwise he'll lose everything. So Brahma's stuck. Yes. Therefore, Indra becomes worried when he sees sages performing austerities. This man will become so powerful, he'll take my position. Why? Because austerity is so powerful. Lord Brahma says that I create the whole universe by austerity. By austerity. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
This chapter seems to be very important in terms of like evidence. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that Lord Brahma is actually confirming that the goal of the Vedas is to understand who Krishna is, and he is the original, the origin of the Vedas. So, do you think this can be a chapter for preachers in terms of like presenting the evidence about who Krishna is?
Sure. There's so many significant verses in this chapter. Some of them are quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Some of them Srila Prabhupada quotes often. Stane stata shrudigatam tanu anmanovir. The kane prayasamudapasana eva. When Ramananda Roy was suggesting different verses that point to the ultimate goal of life, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was rejecting them one after another. That's external, that's external, that's external, that's external. But when he came to this verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted, yes, this is right. Now you can still say more, but this is accepted. So that verse is important. So many important verses in this chapter. So if someone understands this chapter, so much knowledge we get, so much understanding.
There also seems to be a similarity between the experience of Lord Brahma and Vyasadeva in terms of like the sense of moroseness until the moment when they realize that for Vyasadeva, the fact that he didn't describe the pastimes of Krishna, and for Brahma that until he tested Krishna, he didn't probably know who Krishna was.
It doesn't say that Brahma was morose till then, but these were both opportunities for higher realization. Narada because he was morose, Brahma because he was audacious. I'm the controller of the universe. How powerful can this boy be? So it was they got started in different ways, but they both came to the point of increasing their appreciation for Krishna. Thank you. Something else? Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Nam, Hare Nam. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, it's mentioned that spontaneous devotion of Rajvasis.
What?
Spontaneous devotion.
What is devotion?
Spontaneous.
Spontaneous devotion.
Yes.
Yes.
So basically, they were not following any rules and regulations.
You're, unless I'm wrong, you're speaking like this, and it becomes hard to understand what you're saying. Speak up loudly and clearly, remembering that I have a 30% hearing deficit. So loudly and clearly.
Sure. So they were not following any rules and regulations.
Yes. They weren't following the rules and regulations.
Yes. But in Nectar of Devotion, we see that like Raganuga Bhakti comprises of Vedic Bhakti, right? Like,
Raganuga Bhakti
comprises is a superset of Vedic Bhakti.
Raganuga Bhakti is a subset of
superset
of Vaidhi Bhakti.
Yes.
They're not in the position of Raganuga Bhakti. They're in the position of Ragatmika Bhakti. Raganuga means following the residents of Vrindavan. These are the residents of Vrindavan. So Raganuga means practicing in the advanced stage to develop. One develops an intense greed to follow in the footsteps of a particular resident of Vrindavan in a particular relationship with Krishna. That's called Raganuga. The residents of Vrindavan aren't situated in Raganuga Bhakti. Their devotion is called Ragatmika, spontaneous love for Krishna, already eternally perfected, no practice.
Thank you. And Maharaj, it's also seen that Vrajvasis, they have a lot of attachment for their children. Mm-hmm. Like, is it conducive to have such attachment in normal?
They have a lot of attachment to their children, but they were more attached to Krishna until Krishna became their children. Oh. Then they had equal attachment for their children as they used to have for Krishna, because their children were actually Krishna. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, they were more attached to Krishna than
they were more attached to Krishna than to their own children. That was asked by Parikshit Maharaj, although Krishna wasn't a member of their immediate families, they were so attached to Krishna. Mm. Why? Because he's the soul of all souls. Mm.
Thank you.
Something else?
And after this pastime, does it go back that they are more attracted to Krishna again and less attracted?
Yes, as far as I understand. Now their main attraction is to Krishna again.
Mm-hmm. And so they realize that something has changed, or they just carry on as
they carry on, but for that year, their love and affection for their own sons or the cows for their own calves becomes still greater than, or becomes equal to their attachment to Krishna. Because actually, they were Krishna. That lasts for 1 year. Anything else? Okay, again, I'm not going to stretch us out. We could begin some more reading. Or, well, are there any questions about anything else while we're here? Yes.
So since we're still talking about Agasura, and he's representing envy.
He's what?
Representing envy.
Envy, yes.
Yes. I was wondering, well, Guru Maharaj always says that envy is the one thing that can't be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And he said it's in the Bhagavatam. And so like anger, lust, everything can be engaged in some way, but envy can't. And I was wondering how to practically deal with this anartha. I know appreciation is what's recommended. But I feel like we can also appreciate very superficially.
Appreciate what?
We can appreciate very superficially. Like it's not, you can just say like, oh, I appreciate your service, which is nice. But I think a deep appreciation will.
Deep is better than superficial, but at least start with superficial. Envy is also finally superficial. It's just the product of illusory energy, although it may go deep. But let us start at least superficially appreciating. From superficial appreciation, we hope it will come to deeper appreciation. We can hope for that. We can aspire for that. To appreciate every living being in relationship to Krishna, or at least to appreciate all the devotees in relationship to Krishna. We should want that. We should want that. But if we don't have deep appreciation, at least start with superficial. We're chanting Hare Krishna. We like to chant with deep appreciation, deep taste. We don't have deep appreciation. We don't have deep taste. Well, at least let us chant with something, some superficial taste, something. Whatever I have, let me begin. Whatever I have, let me begin. And then we can hope that from there, it will mature, just like capital. You don't have much capital, but if you invest it, then it can grow. So then it becomes a lot of money. So in the beginning, we may not have much. We may have some superficial appreciation, but at least it's appreciation. Ultimately, envy is superficial. What is anartha pasamam shakshat bhakti yogam adhokshajay? The anarthas are superfluous. Prabhupada uses that word. They're just picked up from the material energy. They have nothing to do with us. All these anarthas and illusions and attachments and all of that other stuff. Calm, krodh, lobh. It has nothing to do with the living entity. But somehow we're involved with these superfluous appearances. So that's superfluous, superficial. So at least if we have some superficial appreciation for the Vaishnavas, we can begin something. And it can become deep appreciation. Something else?
I also have another question about, so there's us being envious, but there's also the mentality that people are envious of me. And I was wondering, what causes that?
What causes the perception that people are envious of me?
Yeah.
It may be that they are envious of me.
Yeah. But sometimes it's
and generally, everyone is envious of everyone else in the material world. We're envious of others, so we think everyone is envious of us. Atmavan manyate jagat. I'm envious of you, you're envious of me. Or I'm thinking of you with envy, and I assume that you're thinking of me with envy. The whole atmosphere becomes permeated with envy. And we sort of work it up. The business of the mind is to seize upon some fault in others and then start pumping it up. They did this to me, they did that to me. Well, it's because like the internet, you start bad-mouthing someone and it becomes like a chorus, and then it becomes like a choir, and it becomes like an orchestra, and it becomes like the ocean. You just start bad-mouthing, and it spirals. So the same process goes on internally. I start thinking ill of someone and obsessing. OCD. Is that what they call it? Yeah, OCD. obsessive compulsive disorder. Everyone is more or less afflicted by obsessive compulsive disorder. We start obsessing over, they did this to me, they did that to me, they're this, they're that. And it becomes amplified within. Person didn't do anything practically, but I seize upon some fault and start amplifying it. This is the nature of Maya. So to counteract that appreciation, this person finds something good.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that the internet is full of that mentality, just like I'm in a superior position, everyone like envious of me, and and then it carries on for this reason and that reason. So, yeah.
Plus, on the internet, anyone can say anything, and someone will listen. There's a cartoon, I think, by now, ancient and famous, where it shows a dog sitting in front of a monitor, and there's another dog also sitting in front of a monitor. And the caption says, the good thing about the internet is no one knows you're a dog. So you get people who would be recognized face to face as absolute fools and insufferable bores and just basically idiots. But somehow on the internet, they're transformed into sages. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a description of the characteristics of Kali Yuga. And one is that audacity, a person who's audacious will be appreciated as a sage. Someone will be considered a great person just because of being audacious, obnoxious, basically. It's Kali Yuga. Shato naiskritiko lasha. In the mode of ignorance, there's some excellence in the mode of ignorance. What is that? One excels in insulting others. Naiskritiko. So the internet helps in so many of these. Kali's tool, the internet advances Kali Yuga, so that the business of criticizing others becomes global and somehow becomes stoked. People who would never say, people say things on the internet that they would never say face to face or in other circumstances, but on the internet, somehow or other. This is called Maya. It's called Maya. And so many other things. We won't go into criticizing the internet. And finally, we can't blame the internet, it's us. The internet is just an extension of our minds and senses and words. So somehow we have to transfer our attention to Krishna. So this Krishna book is meant for that. That we could be sitting here on our keyboards reading, our Facebook feeds or reading the latest outrages expressed in our chat groups and responding and whatever, amplifying. But instead we have the opportunity to hear the beautiful pastimes of Krishna, to hear about his words, to hear about how he decorates himself in Vrindavan, how he plays with his friends, how he deals with the wayward activities of Lord Brahma, how the realizations that Brahma has about Krishna. So in this way, we get to use our time profitably and in a way that brings peace and happiness to the heart instead of agitating the mind, agitating the heart, making us feel worse and taking it out on whoever digitally. We can appreciate these activities of Krishna. And even the internet, if the internet were filled with the qualities, activities, pastimes, name, form of Krishna, even the internet would be purified. So, of course, that I don't know how much hope we could hold out that the internet would be filled with Krishna Katha. There's so much Shrotavyadni Rajendra Nunam Santi Sahasrasham Apashyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grihamedinam. For the materialists, there's so many useless topics. Prabhupada, lecturing on that verse, said that it basically means the newspapers, although there were no newspapers at the time of Maharaj Parikshit. Prabhupada said this, Shrotavyadni Rajendra. There's so many topics means the newspapers, because the newspapers are full of useless topics. But now the newspapers have been way surpassed by the internet, where the number of topics is unlimited, and everyone can generate their own Gramya Katha. Previously, I had to subscribe to someone else's Gramya Katha, and as much as they could generate within their budget, I would sit and read. Now everyone can be a creator of Gramya Katha, either in video form or in written form or as images, as what are those called? Where you have a picture and you put. No, you have a picture and you give a caption that gives a different meaning. Memes, right? Memes. This is memes. So you can have memes, you can have videos, you can have multimedia, this, that, the other thing. Everybody can generate their own Maya and distribute it. We can share Maya across national boundaries, across the world, a global village of Maya. That's going on. And so many other things that we won't even talk about going on in the internet. But here's the real opportunity. Hear about Krishna and what is it? Pavoshadat Shrotamano Viraman. It will be pleasing to the mind, pleasing to the heart. The newspapers don't please the mind and heart. You can ask anyone that you're reading the New York to here in India, you get 20 pages or something, 30 pages. And the New York Times, my goodness, is like a book. It's really so much. And at one time, anyway, but you ask anyone, you've read the newspaper, how do you feel after you read it? And who will say, I feel so blissful. My heart is just filled with joy. My mind is peaceful. No one will say that.
This became quite a phenomenon, and there was a newspaper started that was printing only good news, that people could subscribe to some sort of newspaper that would only print good news.
Good news.
That someone could read, just good news.
Of course, the good news from the Krishna conscious point of view is also bad news. You're calling it good news. Somebody got married, somebody won the soccer match, someone, this good news, that good news. Good news or bad news, it's all bad. Dvaite bhajra bhajra gyan e manu dharma e balu e manda e sab brahma. In Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the world of duality, this good and bad is all nonsense. It's all bad. Prabhupada gave the example, wet stool and dry stool. The dry stool is good. The wet stool, that's not so good. It's all stool. Therefore, Krishna says, what is that? I forget where, but one has to become indifferent to happiness and distress. Harsha marsha bhayoddvekar yukta sasuki nara. One place. So the good news is also bad. The only good news is the news that comes from Krishna Loka or from Krishna consciousness. That's good news. Even the bad news is good when it's Krishna conscious. Yudhishthira Maharaj is exiled to the forest and so many things. Ultimately, that will be good news. We're hearing about those topics also. We're hearing about Krishna leaving Vrindavan, which is painful. But in that, Krishna's absence from Vrindavan actually creates the highest ecstasy. So on the spiritual platform, even the bad news is good. And on the material platform, even the good news is bad. Spiritual world, everything is all good. Material world, all bad. Good or bad, it's all bad. So we want to hear the spiritual news of Krishna. That will be good for us. Okay. We can stop here. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare